I was bleeding, glass in my eyes, thinking I'd die. My best friend Mike said he'd come to the hospital. He lied, and our savings vanished with him. And then I found his hidden stash. My name is Emily, and I'm 30, living in Portland, Oregon. It was a warm July evening, the kind where the sunset paints the sky orange over the Willamette River. I was riding shotgun in my brother Jake's beat-up sedan, cruising down I-5, my eyes glued to my phone, chasing a rare Pokemon in some silly game. Jake was chatting with his buddy Mark in the back, their laughter filling the car. Life felt normal, fleetingly safe. Then, in a split second, it wasn't. A deafening crash shattered the air. Something heavy smashed through the windshield, right where my head had been a moment before. I screamed a raw, animal-like sound that tore from my throat before I even registered the pain. My head throbbed, a searing heat spreading across my skull. My left shoulder felt like it had been crushed under a sledgehammer. I couldn't move my arm, couldn't think straight. Glass shards stung my face, and my vision blurred red. I was screaming, but it felt distant, like it wasn't me. Jake swerved, cursing, tires screeching as he pulled onto the shoulder. Mark was yelling something, but my ears rang too loud to make sense of it. I touched my face, my fingers slick with blood. My phone lay forgotten in my lap. The screen cracked. I looked up and saw it a gaping hole in the windshield, jagged edges glinting under the highway lights. A chunk of concrete, bigger than a football, sat lodged in the passenger seat, inches from where my head had been. "What the hell was that?" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. He was staring at me, wide-eyed, his hands gripping the wheel. I couldn't answer. My chest heaved, each breath a struggle against the pain radiating from my shoulder. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I told the operator, "Something hit me. I'm hurt bad. I-5, near the Fremont Bridge. Hurry." The operator's calm voice felt like a lifeline, but my mind was racing. I thought of David, my husband, my rock for the past 10 years. I had to call him. I had to say goodbye. My fingers shook as I dialed his number, each ring an eternity. When he picked up, his voice was warm, steady, like always. "Em, you okay?" "David," I choked out, tears mixing with the blood on my face. "A concrete block. It hit me, through the windshield. I don't think I'm gonna make it." My voice broke, and I heard him gasp, but he stayed calm, telling me to hold on, that he was coming. "Promise me," I whispered. "We'll still dance in the rain, okay?" It was our thing, a silly promise we made when we were dating, spinning in the Portland drizzle like kids. "I promise, Em. Just stay with me," he said, his voice tight. I could hear his car keys jangling, the engine starting. He was already on his way. Jake pulled off at the next exit, his hands shaking as he waved down the ambulance. Red and blue lights flashed, cutting through the haze in my mind. The pain was unbearable now, my shoulder screaming with every tiny movement. I tried to focus on David's voice in my head, his promise. The EMTs rushed over, their faces a blur of concern. They tried to assess me, but glass was everywhere: my hair, my neck, my eyes. I couldn't open them fully, the shards stinging like needles. "Ma'am, can you move your neck?" one asked, his voice urgent but kind. I shook my head slightly, wincing. My neck didn't hurt, but my shoulder felt like it was on fire. They debated how to move me, worried about the glass. I forced myself to stay conscious, gripping the edge of the seat. "I can do it," I rasped, stabilizing my head with my good hand. With their help, I slid onto the stretcher, every movement agony. David's face appeared as the ambulance doors opened. His brown eyes were steady, but I saw the fear beneath his calm. He climbed in beside me, holding my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You're gonna be okay, Em," he said, his voice a quiet anchor in the chaos. I wanted to believe him, but the pain, the blood, the glass, it all screamed otherwise. I thought of my parents in Seattle, my best friend Mike nearby in Portland. Would they even care? In that moment, I felt the weight of how fragile life was, how quickly it could all end under a bridge in the middle of nowhere. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the siren wailed as we sped toward Portland General Hospital. I lay on the stretcher, my body screaming with pain, glass still embedded in my skin. David held my hand, his grip steady, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. "You're doing great, Em," he said softly, his voice cutting through the chaos in my head. I wanted to believe him, but the throbbing in my shoulder and the sting in my eyes told a different story. Every jolt of the ambulance felt like a hammer against my skull. The EMTs worked fast, checking my vitals, asking questions I could barely answer. "Can you feel your fingers? Your toes?" one asked. I nodded weakly, my left arm limp, useless. They didn't try to put a neck brace on me, too much glass around my neck. I held my head still, terrified it might be worse than it felt. David's eyes never left mine, his calm masking the panic I knew he felt. I clung to that, to him, like a lifeline. We reached the hospital, and they wheeled me into the ER. It was a madhouse, beeping monitors, crying patients, nurses shouting orders. I was parked in a corner, still on the stretcher, glass crunching under me. A nurse glanced at me, promised a doctor would come soon, then vanished. Minutes turned into an hour. No one cleaned the glass from my eyes or checked my shoulder. The pain was a living thing, pulsing with every heartbeat. I felt exposed, forgotten, like I was just another body in a sea of chaos. David stayed by my side, his hand never leaving mine. "They'll get to you soon," he said, but his voice wavered. I could see him scanning the room, willing someone to notice us. I tried to speak, to tell him I was scared, but my throat was tight, my words stuck. The fluorescent lights burned my eyes, and I squeezed them shut, glass shards biting deeper. I thought of my parents in Seattle. Would they even care if I didn't make it? I pushed the thought away, focusing on David's steady breathing beside me. Finally, a doctor appeared, harried, her eyes scanning a clipboard. "Emily, right? We'll get you to X-ray and a CT scan," she said, barely looking at me. They wheeled me away, David following until they told him to wait. The scans were a blur, cold machines, sharp instructions to stay still. I kept thinking, this is it. They'll find something broken. pain, something bleeding. When they brought me back, the doctor tossed me a bottle of Tylenol. For the pain, she said, already moving to the next patient. I almost laughed, the absurdity hitting me. Tylenol? For a concrete block to the head? I looked at David, his face pale under the hospital lights. I'm still here, I whispered, trying to reassure him, or maybe myself. But the truth was creeping in. I felt alone. Even with him there, the hospital didn't care. The staff saw me as a number, not a person bleeding and terrified. I thought of calling my parents, my best friend Mike, anyone who might give a damn, but something told me they wouldn't. David squeezed my hand, his eyes promising he'd stay, no matter what. It was all I had, and it wasn't enough to drown out the growing emptiness inside me. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, the pain in my shoulder pulsing like a heartbeat, I clung to David's hand. The Tylenol did nothing, and the ER's chaos swirled around me. I needed someone, anyone, to care. My parents, Susan and Robert, lived up in Seattle, a few hours away. They were my first thought. Maybe they'd drop everything, jump in the car, be here. I fumbled for my phone, glass still crunching under my fingers, and called my mom. It was late, past 11 p.m., but this was life or death. She picked up, her voice groggy, annoyed. Emily, it's late. What's wrong now? I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Mom, I'm in the hospital. A concrete block hit me through the windshield on I-5. I'm hurt bad. My voice cracked, betraying the fear I was trying to hide. Silence stretched on the other end, then a sigh. You're always so dramatic, she said. Can't this wait till morning? I'm in bed and your father has an early meeting. I blinked, stunned, the phone trembling in my hand. Mom, I might not make it till morning, I whispered. She muttered something about sending pictures, then hung up, saying she'd check them later. I stared at the phone, my chest hollow. David squeezed my hand, his eyes soft but furious. They'll come around, he said, but I could tell he didn't believe it. I tried my dad next. Robert answered, his voice sharp. What's this about, Emily? It's nearly midnight. I told him everything, the block, the blood, the hospital. His response, sounds like you're fine if you're calling. We'll talk tomorrow. He hung up before I could say another word. My parents, the people who raised me, didn't care enough to stay on the line. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the betrayal sharper than the glass in my skin. Then there was Mike, my best friend of 10 years. He lived 5 minutes from Portland General, in a cramped apartment near the Pearl District. We'd been through everything together. Heartbreaks, late night talks, stupid inside jokes. If anyone would show up, it'd be him. I texted him, my fingers shaky. Mike, I'm in the ER. Got hit by a concrete block. Can you come? His reply came fast. Oh my God, Em, that's insane. I'll be there. Relief flooded me, brief and warm. I told David to call a lift for Mike since he was broke, as usual. David nodded, his jaw tight, and sent the money. An hour passed. No Mike. The ER's fluorescent lights buzzed above me, and the pain in my shoulder grew sharper, like a knife twisting with every breath. I texted Mike again. You coming? No reply. David checked his phone, frowning. He says he's just getting in the shower. David read aloud, his voice laced with disbelief. I froze. A shower? I was lying here bleeding, thinking I might die, and my best friend was taking a shower? My heart sank, the sting of abandonment cutting deeper than the glass. Tell him not to bother, I muttered, turning my face away so David wouldn't see the tears. The hospital staff finally wheeled me for more scans, leaving David to pace the waiting room. Alone with my thoughts, I replayed my mom's sigh, my dad's dismissal, Mike's absence. These were the people I'd counted on my whole life, and they couldn't even pretend to care. David was all I had, his steady presence the only thing keeping me from falling apart. But even that felt fragile, like a thread stretched too thin. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of their indifference pressing down on me, heavier than the concrete block that started it all. I wasn't just fighting the pain in my body, I was fighting the realization that I was utterly, achingly alone. The hospital sent me home with a bottle of Tylenol and a pat on the back. The scans showed no broken bones, no brain damage, just bruising and soft tissue damage. You're lucky, the doctor said, her eyes already on the next chart. Lucky? I wanted to scream. A concrete block had smashed through my world, and all I got was a bruise and a word that felt like a slap. David drove me home to our small apartment in Northeast Portland, his hands steady on the wheel, but I could see the exhaustion in his slumped shoulders. I stared out the window, the city blurring past, every overpass on I-5 a reminder of that night. At home, I crawled into bed, the pain in my shoulder a dull roar. Sleep was my only escape, but even that was haunted by flashes of glass, the thud of concrete, my own screams. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, certain something was about to fall on me. The kitchen became a minefield, every clatter of a dropped pan sent me spiraling, my hands shaking as I saw that shattered windshield again. Driving was worse. The first time David tried to take me to the grocery store, we passed under a bridge, and I froze, my breath hitching, my nails digging into my palms. Turn around, I whispered. He did, no questions asked, but I saw the worry in his eyes. I couldn't shake the fear. Every loud noise, every shadow, every car ride felt like a gamble with my life. Portland, once my home, now felt like a trap. I read online about others, over 200 similar attacks that summer, rocks and debris hurled from bridges. I wasn't alone, but that didn't comfort me. I started a petition, my hands trembling as I typed, begging the city to install nets, cameras, anything to stop this madness. I posted it on social media, hoping for support, for someone to care. Instead, I got cruelty. Strangers commented, "Stop whining," or "You're alive, aren't you?" One guy wrote, "Sounds like you're milking it for attention." Each word was a knife, twisting deeper. I deleted the post, my face burning with shame, but the words stayed, echoing in my head. David tried to help, bringing me coffee, sitting with me in the dark when I couldn't get out of bed. But I saw the toll it took on him, his eyes red from sleepless nights, his voice softer, like he was afraid I'd break. I wanted to be strong for him, but I was drowning. My eating disorder, something I'd fought for years, crept back. I'd stare at a plate of food, my stomach churning, unable to eat more than a bite. In 2 weeks, I'd barely managed a single meal. My body felt like it was betraying me, just like everyone else. I tried to reach out again. I called my mom, hoping she'd softened. "Susan, I'm struggling," I said, my voice small. "This isn't just a bruise. It's messing with my head." She sighed, impatient. "Emily, you're fine. You didn't even break anything. Move on." Move on? I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the weight of that concrete block, the terror of thinking I'd die. But I didn't. I hung up, my chest tight, and cried until my eyes burned. My dad didn't even bother answering my calls. The world kept spinning, but I was stuck. I'd walk to the corner store, my heart pounding, scanning the sky for falling objects. People stared at me like I was crazy, their whispers cutting through the fog in my head. "She looks fine," I overheard once, outside a coffee shop in Alberta Street. Fine? I was a ghost, haunted by a moment no one else seemed to care about. I'd survived, sure, but surviving wasn't living. It was just existing, trapped in a body that flinched at every sound, in a mind that replayed the crash on a loop. David was my only anchor, but even he couldn't pull me out of this. The city, my family, my so-called friends, they'd all moved on, leaving me to fight this battle alone, with no justice, no answers, just the echo of that word, lucky. Weeks after the incident, I was still a shadow of myself, barely leaving my bed in our Northeast Portland apartment. The pain in my shoulder had dulled, but the fear clung to me like damp fog. David tried to keep me grounded, but I could see the strain in his tired eyes. I needed someone else, anyone, to fill the void left by my parents' indifference. So I reached out to Mike, my best friend of 10 years. I thought he'd understand, thought he'd show up. I was wrong. Mike texted back after I messaged him about the hospital night, apologizing for not coming. "I was a mess, Em. I'll make it up to you," he wrote. I wanted to believe him. He came over a week later, his familiar lopsided grin almost convincing me things could be normal again. We sat on my couch, the TV flickering in the background, and I poured my heart out about the crash, the fear, the way no one seemed to care. He nodded, said all the right things, promised to be there. For a moment, I felt less alone. Then things went missing. First, it was $500 from David's wallet, cash we'd saved for groceries and bills. Then a bottle of whiskey from our kitchen shelf, a gift we'd never opened. I noticed Mike's eyes darting around, his hands fidgety. David caught him slipping a small bag of weed from our drawer, something we kept for my anxiety, prescribed legally. "Mike, what the hell?" I confronted him, my voice shaking. He stammered, his face flushed, mumbling about needing cash for rent. But I saw the truth in his bloodshot eyes he was using again, harder than I'd realized. I felt like I'd been hit by that concrete block all over again. This was Mike, the guy who'd stayed up with me through panic attacks, who'd laughed with me over bad pizza in his tiny Pearl District apartment. Now he was stealing from me, using my pain as an opportunity. "Get out," I said, my voice low, trembling with betrayal. He tried to apologize, but I didn't want to hear it. I slammed the door behind him, my heart breaking. That was it, the end of a decade-long friendship, gone in a haze of his addiction. David held me as I cried, his arms warm but not enough to fill the hole Mike left. I'd trusted him, leaned on him, and he'd turned my trauma into a chance to feed his demons. I blocked his number, deleted his texts, erased him from my life. But the loss lingered, a fresh wound on top of the others. My parents hadn't cared, the city didn't listen, and now my best friend had betrayed me. I was running out of people to lose, and the loneliness was suffocating, a weight heavier than any concrete block. The weeks after cutting Mike out of my life felt like wading through quicksand. I stayed in our Northeast Portland apartment, the curtains drawn, the world outside a threat I couldn't face. My shoulder healed slowly, the bruises fading, but the scars in my mind grew deeper. Every creak of the floorboards, every car horn sent my heart racing, my body braced for impact. David was my only constant, his quiet strength holding me together, but I could see the cracks in him too. He'd drive me to therapy, cook meals I barely touched, and sit with me through sleepless nights, but his eyes carried a heaviness I hadn't seen before. Then my mom, Susan, called from Seattle. I hadn't heard from her since the hospital, when she'd brushed off my pain like it was a minor inconvenience. Her voice was sharp, demanding, "Emily, I need you to fly up tomorrow. Our dog Max needs to be put down, and I can't handle it alone." My jaw dropped. The ticket would cost $700, money we didn't have, and she expected me to drop everything, my trauma, my fear, my life, to hold her hand for a pet? I gripped the phone, my voice shaking with rage. "You didn't come when I was dying in the hospital, Mom. You didn't even call to check on me, and now you want me to fly across the country for your dog?" Her response was ice cold. "You sounded fine on the phone, Emily. You always make a big deal out of nothing." I exploded, words spilling out like venom. A concrete block smashed through my windshield. "I thought I was dead, and you didn't care." She hung up, but not before I heard my dad, Robert, yelling in the background, blaming me for upsetting her. That was it. I went no contact, blocking their numbers, their emails, everything. My parents, the people who were supposed to love me, had abandoned me in my darkest hour. Months later, I learned my mom had been diagnosed with a neurological condition, something that messed with her reasoning. She sent a letter, apologizing, her words shaky but sincere. I let her back in, but it wasn't the same. The trust was gone, replaced by a hollow ache. I wanted to forgive her, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard her dismissing me, telling me to move on. The person who threw that concrete block was never caught. Portland police called it a random act, one of hundreds that summer. No leads, no justice. I drove under that same Fremont Bridge every time I left the city, my hands sweating, my heart pounding, waiting for another crash that never came. My eating disorder spiraled, my body wasting away as I lived on coffee and fear. Therapy was a joke, $150 a session for someone to tell me to breathe through it. I stopped going going after 3 weeks. David tried to carry us both, but 5 months after the incident, he broke. One night, he sat on the edge of our bed, his head in his hands, sobbing. "I thought I lost you, Em," he choked out. "I drove so fast to that hospital, praying I'd see you alive one last time. My heart shattered. He'd been strong for me, but he was hurting too, haunted by the same night that trapped me. I held him, whispering apologies, but guilt gnawed at me. I was dragging him down with me, and I didn't know how to stop. I kept living, if you could call it that. Every day was a battle against the flashbacks, the fear, the loneliness. I'd survived, but at what cost? My parents barely spoke to me, my best friend was gone, and the city I loved felt like a war zone. Strangers online called me weak, told me to get over it. My brother Jake shrugged it off when I tried to talk, saying, "It didn't even hit you that hard." No one understood, no one cared, except David, and even he was fraying at the edges. Today, I look fine. The scars on my shoulder are hidden, my smile practiced, but inside, I'm still under that bridge, waiting for the next blow. I told my mom it was the anniversary of that day, hoping for a shred of empathy. She frowned, her voice flat. "Why dwell on it, Emily? It's not worth remembering." But it's all I can remember. It's the sound of glass shattering, the weight of concrete, the sting of being forgotten. I live with it every day, alone in my head, with David as my only tether to a world that doesn't see me. There's no justice, no closure, just me, fighting to keep going, one shaky breath at a time.